Welcome to episode 210 of the Necronama.com. Throughout the month of October, author and editor Alex Woodroe is joining us as we take a deep dive into Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. Today's episode is PICKMAN'S model. All right, so we're back here with episode 5. We're halfway through, and now we're hitting a couple that I don't like as much. Since I know everyone at home is keeping score of which ones I like and don't. What were you going to say, Don?
Well, I was going to say we're in the home stretch. We're getting there.
It's a rough road, though.
Rapidly approaching my favorite one. So.
You see, we have to hit Dark Night of the Soul. That's and then you start building that comeback. So I feel like this actually lines up very well. Anyway, the first thing I wanted to say about this is just anyone who loves the short story or is a huge Lovecraft fan, they probably didn't like this as much. All of the commentary that I read online of people who don't like this episode, it was they missed the point of the short story and it didn't translate this way and the twist in the short story is better and blah, 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 blah. And I want to say that's probably true. I'm not a fan of the short stories. So for me, when I first saw this was on here, I was like, fuck, I don't want to read that. I hate that short story. I love what they did instead. Is it perfect? Hell no. And we're definitely going to get into that and some weird ass accent choices and all kinds of stuff. But number one, the end is just, it's that anthology feel that I crave. Like that is that creep show moment for me. That's that thing that I'm always looking for. And that's my happy place. I feel like everything in this wouldn't have translated from a short story into a film. A lot of times the medium, you need a very, very different flow, or you need to change a lot of things. Even the next episode, you're going to hit that. Like they had to add so much to it because it just wouldn't have even been like a 20-minute film otherwise. So I think that people forget that. I also feel like and I swear I'll let you guys talk eventually. No, I also feel like every time that I hear, oh, the book's so much better than the movie, I get really angry about that stuff because I'm always like, of course it is. It's one person talking to one person. Like this is a very direct line of communication. And then you're reading something. So you get to make the setting, you get to design the characters, you get to like build your own experiences into your understanding of what you're reading. And when you go to a film or a TV show, you have 6,000 billion trillion people working on something. They all are doing their own thing. You have all these people with money coming in, making decisions, polling things, changing things. Then, like I said, you also have that the medium can't convey things the same way. And so that's why I hate that argument. But I really wanted to throw it in here because I didn't see people going, hey, I've never read the short story, but fuck, I hated this episode.
Oh, well.
Oh, good.
I can help you with that. No, I didn't hate it. Although I do think you're absolutely right in terms of seeing a lot of people who are like, oh, the short story. And I do also have to add that, of course, if you are a short story purist, a Lovecraft purist, if you want your Lovecraft to be exactly what it was, I understand why you would have concerns about this episode, but I also have concerns about you as a person, so sit down. And aside from that, like for the rest of us who do enjoy that stuff, but don't necessarily need it to be, true to exactly what it was, of course, there's a lot that gets lost in translation. One of the foundations of Lovecraft and of his genre of horror was the undescribable, right? That thing that is so hard to even explain, that is so beyond human comprehension, the color that's not a color, the angles that are not angles, the thing that's not a thing that you can see and you can't see. how exactly are we supposed to translate that to film? Like, this is
Yeah.
inherently one of the most difficult subgenres to turn into a visual sort of thing. Anybody who attempts that deserves cookie points just for trying it. I don't even care how it came out. That was a big thing, just that they tried. And like, there's a reason why we don't have piles and piles of Lovecraft adaptations that are like mainstream popular. There's a reason for that. It is genuinely hard. And they're going to appeal more or less to a niche audience. And that niche audience changes from adaptation to adaptation, depending on if it catered to the purists or to everybody else, or tried to. So yeah, you can't really call yourself a fan of Lovecraft and ignore the fact that half of his horror came from things that cannot be put in a visual medium. Just It's okay, acknowledge that and applaud the people who tried to adapt his stories and bring them to a broader audience anyway. That's totally fine. We don't have to love every single episode to still love that it exists.
Absolutely. John, do you have anything to add to that?
I can't follow that. So
I know. I was so happy that I went first. I was like, haha. No.
I'm so sorry.
No. I will add to what you said about the idea of recreating these things that are beyond description on film or on television. That I wasn't introduced to Lovecraft because I was having this conversation with my daughter about authors and whatever, and I said, I found this copy of my Edgar Allan Poe collections, right? And I was like, well, I'm going to sit and read something I have. And I just started looking through and I crossed through. Sorry, James. I know that's a no-no. I crossed through in the table of contents, like this stuff. I'm like, holy shit. I read these and I forgot that this was his stuff. Stuff that you shouldn't forget, not something like the Cast of Amontillado, but, the Purloined Letter and Telltale Heart. I'm like, oh shit, I forgot that was him. Anyway, I'm saying that to get to the way in which he described a good number of things, even like the Mask of the Red Death. Like you get a good visual in your head from what he's talking about. Whereas with Lovecraft, I wasn't turned on to him until maybe about 15, 20 years ago, as far as like understanding who he is and what he produced and stuff. And so one of the people I was talking to who was a huge Lovecraft fan, for her students, she will always make an assignment to use the descriptions that Lovecraft has in some of his stories to, draw Cthulhu or something else that appears. And what was funny is the description that he gives, the Cthulhu monster itself, or Cthulhu god, there is no universally accepted depiction of it.
Oh no, there isn't. That whole tentacle mouth image that we're so used to now, that's just something popular culture created and we all embraced.
Exactly.
That's not like word for word what it was actually supposed to be, not even by a long shot.
And I think the genius in it, this will be one of the few times I compliment Lovecraft. The genius in it is you have that moment where so much is open to interpretation, where you create, a cultural aspect within that fandom where they all have their understanding of what this looked like according to the story. They all have their individual ones. Whereas you have other authors, they make it very clear. You might have some things that a little bit different as far as like, oh, I thought this person would have had more salt and pepper hair, or I envision this person of having a much harsher face, or, when it does become realized. But when you have it to where it's open, you can have people that are really happy with it. You have people that are maybe upset with it, but no one is ever going to be right going into it as far as like, I knew this is exactly how they were going to depict, these monsters in this story, because even the way the art is represented, whether it's in this story or in the next one that's also off of Lovecraft or based off Lovecraft stories, you see how much of a role that art plays. Then you think about the way that art functions, where I'm putting something visual in front of you, but is going to elicit thoughts in you that you may not have been thinking about had you not looked at this. And the same thing with Lovecraft. I'm describing these things and you may develop a picture, an image that's different than somebody else's impression is going to be, just as they're going to have a different impression of the art that's on display. So, I mean, it was very well done. Story-wise, I have some issues, but we'll get into that.
The final thing I really want to add to this part about Lovecraft, I think it's also important to realize Lovecraft mainly wrote about himself. It was always this very personal thing. And so he didn't need to describe things. It was what he feared. He feared what's in the dark. He feared what you can't see.
Yeah.
And that's also why it resonates with so many of us, like, because we like being afraid of the dark is a very universal thing, or being afraid of what's out there, right? And I think that people lose that. Like, all authors write personal stuff, but I think that they lose that level of how personal Lovecraft stuff was. And so it's never going to translate to everybody, because we're not going to see the same shit, because we're not afraid of the same thing that's out there.
I'm sure it was never his intention to end up having plushies made out of his characters. I think I was just exercising his own demons, and either it happens to vibe with you or it doesn't, and that's the end of it. And it happens to vibe with a lot of people. That's the magic. And I think, for me at least, I did love reading a lot of Lovecraft stuff, especially when I was really, really young, because there was a huge stretch of my life when I was suffering from recurring nightmares, pretty bad ones. I was just always trying to escape this building. I was always being chased by something. And it's that sort of dream knowing. You know what I mean? Like when you know something in a dream, but you don't know why you know it. Like in the dream, I knew something was chasing me. I have never seen that thing. In the dream, I knew it was really bad. And my only purpose for being there was to get away from that thing. Although, again, I never saw it. I would meet people along my way, but I knew in some way that those people weren't really people. They were part of that thing that was chasing me. And experiencing that sort of dream knowing without knowing why you know, or without actually seeing anything, was such a huge part of my childhood and teenage years that for me, reading Lovecraft was so easy, because when he talks about, a feeling without seeing, man, I'm there. I know exactly what you're talking about. That is 100%. Half of my life is lived in that space. I have no issues with it. I don't even need to picture what you're telling me, like visually. I don't need to imagine the shape of the thing, because I know the feeling it elicits in my body, and I don't need anything else. And I feel like for a lot of people who felt that way, reading him was like discovering a friend that you didn't know you could have, because it's not super common, or at least it wasn't when I was a teenager, to even talk about things like recurring nightmares and that sort of serious stuff with each other.
Right.
So for me, entering into that space where I don't actually need to know what the thing looks like, super easy, not a problem. I can't even imagine reading Lovecraft if you're somebody who is more literal minded and need the descriptions and need to be able to picture things accurately. You must find him so frustrating, and I would totally understand that.
Would that be the kind of people that spend like 5 or 6 pages writing about a rock?
Oh man,
a lunch. Yes, people love that stuff.
Sorry, James.
Oh, is that James?
No.
No. He was telling me a conversation.
Pet peeve in writing.
Okay.
Yeah, where somebody was complaining, like, "Oh, people in this genre don't do this, and people in this genre don't do this." It's like, I will spend 6 pages just describing a rock, and I'm like, I'm not going to read 6 pages on a rock's description, because, and neither are most readers. Nobody could. Oh my gosh! Unless you're a geologist, you don't give a shit about rocks.
That's when I need like a choose your own adventure thing at the bottom of the page. If you don't give a shit about this, go to page 122.
Well, I mean, realistically, that's how I read a lot of high fantasy. It's like, oh, they're starting to describe people's outfits now. Flip 3 pages forward. Yep. It's fine.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's great for costume design if you're like, oh, I want to make a book accurate version of X.
Yeah, if you're into that, it's wonderful. I'm happy it exists. It's just not for me.
But I mean, I think
that's exactly the thing right there. What she just said. It's great, but it's not for me.
Exactly. And that's what I think works to piggyback off of what you're two talking about, that's what works about having something that is not necessarily open-ended, but it's not specifically described. So you don't, as a reader, you don't get bogged down in that. And then as an audience member, I'm sorry, as somebody who's creating something for an audience, you have room to create it according to your vision, as opposed to I'm not picking on Lord of the Rings, but I know that there are parts of Lord of the Rings where they're talking for a long period about one thing or describing one thing. And it's the same thing where when you start watching the film, because I had friends who read all the books, and when the movies came out, their joy was that the film was exactly how it was described in the book, or I should say the scenery. And the costumes, like this, one of my friends, he was raving about it. I was like, man, so have you seen Lord of the Rings? He was like, no. It's like, it's even better than the books, because the books could do all these descriptions. And when I saw the clothing that they were wearing, the description was just like in the book. And I'm sitting there like, oh.
Very happy for you.
And I thought I was a nerd. Okay.
But I feel like your friend won't like my writing.
No, he probably would. But no, I have another guy I know who does a lot of cosplay and stuff, and he'll get his ideas from the books and from the movies when it comes to, making his Gandalf the Grey costume, or making I forgot, one of the guardsmen or something. So it's beneficial in some worlds, but I see creatively going off of this as source material that you have so much more room. Much more room.
Yep. It's actually interesting because there's a trend right now that's sort of moving away from those sort of detailed descriptions, because I do a lot of editing. I edit freelance as well, and I try to keep in touch with what people are looking for, what publishers are looking for the sake of my clients. And there is this trend going on right now, and I've met several readers who are telling me that the more detailed a description is of like a piece of clothing, right? When you start to add more layers, so it's this color, and then it has 3 buttons on the cuff, and then the collar does this. By the third thing, they're starting to feel a sense of pressure that because the author described it in so much detail, now they as a reader are somehow obligated to picture it correctly. And then the more details are added, the more they start to panic that they're not picturing it correctly, because that was clearly important to the author and they're supposed to do it right, and their brain isn't holding all the details to do it right. And then the enjoyment of reading is just replaced by this sort of anxiety that they're not picturing it correctly. And I've met a surprising number of readers who tell the exact same thing. So it's interesting that I feel like maybe modern readers are starting to, move a little bit away from the elaborate descriptions. Obviously not all of them, but I feel like they were more popular in the past than they are right now. And, fashions change all the time, and I'm sure it's going to come back eventually.
I wonder if there's also a piece where back in the day, you couldn't just pull up a picture of what it's supposed to look like, right?
Okay.
Of course.
And now we could just go on Google and we can literally see this thing that they're describing. Whereas if you had to describe something from the 1700s that no one wears anymore, you'd have to go into massive detail back in the day. And now you can just, there it is, right?
I can just Google a doublet. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Or, but also there's the whole thing that I think horror is way ahead of the curve on. Novellas are God in horror. And I've talked about this before. I believe that it's because you have just the right amount. You can hold the tension without these pieces that stretch everything out, and you lose that, right? And I wonder, as we've moved to novellas and we're going to like shorter movies like Host, where it was less than an hour, Don?
It was less than an hour, yeah.
Like, just we're kind of redefining these things. And when you say that you've heard it as an editor, I know you do some horror, and I don't know what else you do. So
sci-fi, fantasy, all the speculative, like dark speculative genres.
Okay, I thought so. I just didn't want to definitely say so. But I was wondering in my head, like, are you getting this more from horror people or for everybody? Or
I'm getting a lot of it in like modern dark fantasy, urban fantasy, Maybe
Cool.
less in
Okay.
sci-fi, but I've always felt like in terms of fashions, sci-fi, hard sci-fi especially, is always like a couple of years behind the trends and a little bit more resistant to change for some reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm seeing it across definitely horror and fantasy. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I wasn't sure with fantasy. A lot of sci-fi and fantasy are like, the Bible's only 700,000 words. I can outdo that. You know, so I wasn't sure. That was a cheap shot. I'll accept that. But
No, to be fair, that's probably true. Also, you have to imagine that I don't necessarily get those clients.
yeah.
So, you know,
But
my
no,
selection is pretty biased.
Yeah, I'm wondering like how much like even like streaming is affecting that. Like the different things that we're watching quickly and we want to be pulled in, and otherwise I'm not going to watch episode 2, or I'm not going to finish this movie or whatever. And I think all of that translates into how we're ingesting information as well as stories. And so yeah, maybe that's why we're also losing parts of that.
I mean, I feel guilty about this, but whenever somebody tells me, man, that show is great, you've got to watch that show, you just have to suffer through like the first season and a half, which is crap. I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I can't. No, it's no.
Well, even
No.
like I always say that about Parks and Rec. I'm like, look, I don't like season 1, but I love season 2 on, and then I don't like the final season. So I literally tell people to watch 2 through 6 or whatever it is. And I'm like, you won't miss the first season. It's fine. Just start. Like, don't suffer through shit. Life is really short. Like, go to the good stuff.
I watched a couple of episodes of the first season and I quit. I didn't like it.
Yeah. See? But pulling back to Lovecraft, I just want to mention one last thing, because I do think it actually really plays into this episode. And it's the one thing I don't like about this episode. I think they should have gone full Lovecraft with the showing of the monster. Yeah. The monster ruins it for me. I don't like having seen it. I don't like, it's kind of hokey. It doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah.
And I feel terrible saying that when Del Toro's involved in any sense, because, you know, I'm expecting greatness, whether he's on set or just you know, being involved. And I hate the monster in this. And if they had gone full Lovecraft and left it to my imagination, I think this episode would be even stronger.
Yep. I'm just curious, if you'd seen that same monster model in a different film, would you still have like objectively said, oh, that's a bad model? Or is it because it's tied to Lovecraft?
I didn't like it at all.
Okay. That's fair. Totally. I didn't have any feelings about it either way. I did find it odd that we ended up seeing it as clearly as we did, but I didn't think the model was bad.
I think it's context though as well. So I might have liked it in something else. I just felt like everything was so dark and well done, and like and we are expecting Lovecraft vibes. So I think context does play a lot in it. So maybe I can't honestly answer if I would have liked it in something else.
No, that's fair.
But I suppose we should talk about the episode, huh?
Starting with one of my biggest shocks about this when I was actually watching it a second time and trying to dissect what's going on is that I was watching these guys standing around in this art class, and the one thought that passed through my brain was, wow, everybody here is wealthy, aren't they? Like independently wealthy. They talk about Pickman like he comes from money, right? All of these guys come from money. Not a single one of them doesn't. I'm not even sure why they're talking about him coming from money. Clearly, they're all independently family, wealthy, trust fund babies.
Right.
And I found that super interesting because like right now, this minute, we're waging this sort of war to make sure that artists, graphic artists, visual artists still manage to get paid for their work with this whole AI thing coming up. And we don't actually have like they used to. No, they didn't used to. It was either scholarships or patrons of the arts or family money. That's how it used to be. Right. We don't even have the past to refer to. We're like establishing and fighting for people being paid for art is relatively recent. And it did make me wonder what happened to the whole concept of having a patron of the arts, right? That seemed like a good idea. Why did we stop doing that?
Rich people realized they weren't making any money off of it.
Well, yeah, but they could feel really good about themselves. Surely we can bring that back.
And you can launder a lot of money that way.
Yes, launder money from artists.
They did. Well, I guess they didn't have a patron of the arts, but they did have that scamming portion of arts with the whole NFT situation in the past couple of years, where it's, hey, we're going to sell you something. You can't actually physically own it. You own the rights to it.
Oh no, are tech bros the new patrons of the arts? Oh no.
I think that would probably be it, because now since you mentioned AI, I was watching this news story this morning. And of course, I can't remember where it was located, but there is AI art that's on display in some museums. And then there's one in particular where it is basically it's just a digital, it's a big screen, but the creator entered a certain algorithm or whatever that mixes all the colors. So it's a constantly changing image. And all I really thought of it was the old screensavers, because that's what it looked like. It looked like one of those screensavers with, all the different things that it would throw up there. And it just changed colors.
The one with the wobbly lines that just waved around in different colors. That was my favorite screensaver. I missed that.
Me too. And I'd forgotten about it. So now I'm sad all over again.
Oh,
no, it really was.
Well, it's okay. You can go to a museum and find one on a wall somewhere.
Oh gosh, that's such a terrible thought now that tech bros are the new patrons of the arts. But it's true if you think about it. We're talking about somebody with a disposable income that wants to invest in something that somebody else does and doesn't bring them necessarily any sort of profit, but they just feel good about having done it. And yeah, that's what they are. The only difference is patrons of the arts used to actually have a sense of what art meant. And now we are just teaching them less and less about art with every new generation, to the point where, they'll just invest in basically art crypto. That's terrible. We need to bring it back. We need to pull back from the brink here.
Man.
I mean, surely after they've completely failed with NFTs and they're going to completely fail with AI, they're going to start to figure it out, surely. Right?
No.
Right,
no,
guys?
because the new generation will come in and they'll make all the new mistakes.
Guys, I need some hope here.
There's no hope. You've come to the wrong place. For hope.
Oh my God, James.
That's right. That's going to be our new slogan. We're going to make T-shirts that just say, "You've come to the wrong place."
Place for hope. That's perfect. I want one. I was not warned about this before we started.
See, this is Lovecraft's influence.
Side note, at time of this episode being released, there are shirts available at blah
Our TeePublic site probably has them by now. But no, see, that's such a Lovecraft thing. We watch this thing, now we have no hope. We've given up. Man.
Shall we talk about the accent?
No.
Okay, so hang on. Let me back up and then I'll talk about this accent thing. So you were talking about how they all think he's come from money and they're making a big deal out of it. And then when we see him and where he lives, it's not a great place. It's not super nice. It's it's not what I expect for a college student, but he's also like 105. So that's kind of weird. But I think that I think they purposely brought attention to it so that then he's immediately in juxtaposition to what people think of him. And I guess this is another slight thing I have against this episode, but in the short story, he's kind of just some dude. It doesn't matter who he is. It doesn't matter what he comes from. He's just drawing what he sees. And the horror is the reality that what he's drawing is happening, right? And I do feel like they missed something by making Pickman sort of seem special. And I'm not totally against it. I just think it might have been a stronger choice. But so that's what makes me think that it's very purposely driven to the juxtaposition of what people expect of him versus what we see.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. And he does have a very deliberately chosen, negative chosen one sort of vibe.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then, the accent. So let me start by, and I know you two heard this beforehand because I was ranting, but I adore Crispin Glover, and I've been in love with him since Back to the Future, and I love almost everything he's in. I love Willard. I love his role in What's Eating Gilbert Grape. I love all this stuff that he's done. Then he has his own movies that he's made, which are the weirdest fucking things I've ever seen, and I love Bizarro, and they were still too fucking strange for me. And you know, but overall, if Crispin's in something, I want to see it, right? Like he's just one of those actors that I'm like, oh shit, sweet, I want to see what he did with this, because he'll make some weird choices and it'll come through. Like you go to Back to the Future, and George McFly's laugh does not need to be like what his laugh is. I'm going to do a terrible impression so that you can all hate me, but his laugh is like, right? And there's no reason for this. There's no way that was in the script. George McFly laughs like this. No, nobody did that.
I remember that. Now that you did it, I'm like, yeah, that's what it is. I can't believe my brain stored that for some reason.
But that's such a Crispin thing. It's like this weird little mark that he has to put on his characters. Just these little quirky, why the fuck did you make this choice? And that brings me, I can't even get through this, to this so-called Boston accent, because I'm sorry, I don't know what the fuck this is.
Can I just interject for 1 second?
Yeah.
This part is the most amazing to me. So for the audience members who don't know this, I have an inability to memorize faces, right? I basically cannot distinguish faces one from the other. When I did the first episode on this podcast and we were talking about the movie Men, and that's on that podcast. I love that movie. On that podcast is when I found out that they used the same actor to portray all the men. I had no idea, because that's just what people look like to me. I have no idea what their faces are like. So for me, I don't know actors from each other very much. Like if I see somebody, I have no idea if I've seen them before in a different movie or not. I just see the character. So I have no idea who Crispin is, or whether that's actually his real world accent or not. Like I genuinely would not be able to tell you at first. Now I obviously know. Would not be able to tell you whether he was acting or that was just his accent. And furthermore, I'm not American. So again, I don't genuinely know for sure whether that's an accent that exists in the wild or not. And even so, the first time that I opened up this episode and I heard him speak, I went, no, there's no way that that's real. Like, I have no idea who this guy is. I have no idea about American accents, but there is just no way. There is just no way that that's a real thing. It cannot be. That's how powerfully, like intensely, it scarred me.
I will forever be amazed that Men is the episode that we did when I found that out. And I remember sitting there. I remember just sitting there like, holy shit, like you couldn't plan that if you wanted to, you know? And like, it was so, but it also really served a purpose. And it accomplished like what they were shooting for, and it made it more amazing. So check out our Men episode, because even aside from that is just a great episode. I really loved the conversation on that one. But coming back to Crispin, so he makes these weird fucking choices all the time. And it amazes me how no one around him goes, why don't you wear a funny hat instead? Or why don't you have two different
Walk every 20 words, do push-ups while you speak.
Yeah, you know, like I don't know, just anything else. Like everyone on this set was like, no, that's the way his character talks. What?
Look, I respect weird choices, right? I'm a Frank Zappa fan, which means that I fully understand going after something and it only working out about half the time. As much as I'm a fan, I'm like, he has at least 20 albums that are unlistenable to by man or beast. So I get it. It's fine. Crispin tried something. It didn't work out. I think everybody can universally agree it didn't work out on this one. Right. There's nobody who loves that accent, right? Nobody.
You know, if there is, I would love for them to contact me so we could have a conversation about it. Because I would love to know what it is that they love.
Yeah, I would be fascinated to hear that perspective.
So Don, what about you? Did this accent pull you out, or did you just go fucking Crispin, or what?
I did both. I did both because when he first did it, my thought was like, what the fuck is he doing? And then I said, it's Crispin Glover, because I just wrote down,
Okay.
oh no, I wrote, yay, Crispin Glover for just doing that, because it was like that's almost as bad. And I know Ben Affleck is from the New England area, from Boston area, but it's just as bad as Ben Affleck's accent in The Town, where I'm like, oh my
man.
God, like, you're from this place and you sound bad. I'm like, all right. Okay.
You should have visited home more often. No.
Mm.
Yeah, why did Matt Damon have a better accent in The Departed than he did? Anyway.
But yeah.
But yeah, the accent itself, it didn't pull me out. It just made me go like, it made me suspicious of Crispin Glover's character, because I was thinking, well, maybe he's just putting on a show with what he's doing, because
Oh, I like that.
he doesn't necessarily talk to anybody, at least from my remembering of it. He doesn't talk to anybody until he gets approached, because even the professor's like, oh, we're going to have Mr. Pickman is going to be joining us, blah, blah, blah. And they all see how old he is, but it's not until that other guy kind of interacts with him and he says that he has a conversation. So I don't know. Maybe it's one of those, hey, I'm going to see who's going to be the first person going to fall for my bullshit and use them to my benefit.
Don, can you do the accent?
No, I can't. I can't do do it. Like, what he did was just so out there. It's just like,
it's interesting because it's not even just the accent, it's some of the inflections, the enunciation of the words, some of the it's so bizarre. And you're right, it does give me that feeling like something is shady with this guy. And it plays into that whole thing where it looks like they were deliberately trying to make him seem like a chosen one.
See, and maybe I'm overthinking this, but I was kind of like, are they trying to throw you off of the fact that the monsters are real? Are they trying, like even the way Pickman stands when you first see him, like he's very much being made to be an outsider or a freak or, you know, just something's wrong with that dude. And so it's like, then you see his paintings and how outlandish they are for the time. And so, like, I was like, are they trying to make you think, oh, maybe he's a killer or maybe he's this?
Right.
And then you kind of get more into the weirdness where you start seeing like the whole group having their feast or whatever you want to call it. And, you know, like I couldn't decide, like, were they just trying to make Crispin more of a red herring than anything?
One thing that I found super interesting about how much focus was put on him being a weirdo and an outsider is that one of the ways that they used in order to signal his otherness, right, is that at first he was just drawing weird and dark things. It's true that after a while they go into being genuinely weird, but at first, at the very beginning, it's just talked about in terms of, oh, he draws dead things and he draws in the graveyard, right? And at that point, everybody was already recoiling. And I was thinking, too, that's what every artist does when they're 13. Like, I polled my artist friends after I watched that episode, and I went, I'm sorry, am I weird here? Did you not go through a draw roadkill phase? Like, where you just sit next to a dead pigeon and draw it? Like, that's normal, right? I felt like such a weirdo asking because I was afraid everybody would just back away slowly. But no, that's a genuine thing most artists actually go through. It's not that weird. So I found it funny that that's exactly what we were kind of told was the weirdest thing about him at first. Because, you know, I like that with movies, despite the fact that it materializes into something later. At first, it wasn't actually something, was it? It was just an artist being an artist and maybe being a little bit more open about it.
And even his way of approaching it, you know, the idea that it's not the aspect of it's rotting flesh and this is something horrible, because you look at something that would typically offend people. Like, I'm doing these monsters, these decrepit bodies, whatever, right? But Pickman, at least in that short moment, for me, he convinces me there's nothing wrong with him, which I mean, it's still debatable. because he says, it's the flesh is always changing. This idea that what I'm looking at, my subject is not still, my object is still, or my subject is changing and capturing, the grotesque nature of it, the beauty in it, and pointing out, just like art is subjective, it's also what gets chosen to be the subject of art can be subjective. Like why, you talked about art class, like why do so many art programs, when it comes to sketching or painting, like it's human form and nature. I mean, those are like two staples that you're always going to have, as far as like, we're going to bring somebody in, you're going to sketch them, you're going to paint them, you're going to do whatever, or here's this bowl of, fruit, or here's this vase with flowers, draw this. As opposed to like with this. All right, guys, we're going to meet at the cemetery around 8:30 tonight. There's going to be a fresh corpse. Hope everybody's ready. If you're sensitive, don't eat.
They should have met with the
out.
people in episode 2, because they could have.
That's what I was thinking. That's exactly what I was thinking. It would be perfect.
Well, and then Willard would be there for the rats. I mean, this all makes sense. They should have gotten together.
You got all these connections.
Now, when I was in high school, I was in a photography class, and like it was the develop your picture and all that kind of stuff, right? And I went to a Catholic high school, which is why I'm not Catholic. And I all of my art, no matter what the assignment was, every single piece I did in that class was in graveyards. I lived in graveyards. I loved graveyards. I still love graveyards. In July, I made Dawn take me to a cemetery, and did I not go around and look at the art in the fucking cemetery? Like I'm still
as we drove around. Wow, that's a nice memorial. Wow, wow, that's so detailed. I'm like, James.
You really need
Don's
to
like,
Romania. We've got some beautiful graveyards here. You would love.
I would love that. I would be like, look at that statue, and Don's like, you understand we're in Kentucky and that's a Confederate, and I was like, God damn it. But
don't ruin it for me.
That was an actual one. I was like, fuck them.
But no, like I look at this whole thing of, he draws in graveyards. I'm like, all the art kids I knew, we hung out in graveyards. That's where everybody got high. That's where we talked.
It's normal.
And we were totally super respectful. Nobody was ever kicking over gravestones or defacing anything. Like, we were there because we loved the art around us, and because it was the weird thing to do, So I love that you pointed that out.
Yeah. No, we did the same. I was totally hanging out in graveyards, and I wasn't even like a goth chick or anything. I just found it super peaceful, and our graveyards are beautiful, and it was usually a place where everybody left you alone and you could read in peace and just sit on a bench and chill.
Yep.
It's not weird. I keep telling myself, but it's not. Although I guess sorry, go ahead, Don.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, I just tell people it's the quietest place, it's the most serene place that you'll be able to go to.
They don't have a lot to say.
And if they do, then it's even more interesting.
Right? It's only a bonus. I guess it does go into the other question, which I figured was kind of the main question throughout the middle of this episode, which is, they are dealing with a lot of what is art, right? Is this art? And then is it art if it's like dark and unsettling? And then is it art if I don't like it? And it's weird because that's still stuff that we're dealing with right now, especially if you work in horror in any sort of capacity. You will have heard these debates, and you will have heard people arguing for either side. And I think especially the last one, like, is it still art if I don't like it? That's a very serious issue right now. Read the reviews of absolutely anything, and that is a very, very serious issue where people will discount and disconsider an entire thing because they did not have the experience that they wanted to have from it. And they will, make blanket statements that it's not really art, or it's not a real movie, or it's not real horror, or it's not real whatever. And I've always found those...
not horror.
Yeah, I think every genre hates it because everybody gets that stuff. I've always found it so intriguing. Like, it feels like if you're having that reaction, because that's like 9 out of 10 level reaction for a 2 out of 10 discomfort, right? You didn't like it, but your reaction is it shouldn't exist, right? That's a massive overreaction. So if you're having that overreaction, then this thing affected you somehow, right? It has to have. You don't overreact that much for things you don't care about. So if it affected you somehow, then maybe actually it, accomplished its intended purpose, and maybe that's what was supposed to happen. So I always find these discussions super interesting, especially when people are like advocating really hard for them. That's like nice study of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
I always have a really hard time with critics and reviews, and I don't mean any disrespect to them. I mean, I hate that when someone doesn't like something, then people go, "Oh, I shouldn't watch it then." And so like if I read reviews of something, I read the 5 stars and the 1 stars because so often what made somebody give something 1 star is the reason I want to see it or read it or whatever. And I honestly think I get more out of 1-star reviews than I do out of anything else. But it bothers me if I post that I'm watching a movie, I will get a ton of comments of, is it worth watching? And that is the most annoying question in the world to me. And I refuse to answer it because what's worth something? Fuck you. Like people worked on this. So yes, it's worth something to someone. Are you that someone? I don't know.
Who knows? I don't know you. Yeah.
even my wife, I know her better than I know probably anyone. And I still don't tell her what to watch or things like that. I'm like, hey, I saw something you might like, and I give her the trailer or whatever, right? Like, but I never go, oh, you'll hate that, even if I
Don't
think
even
she
bother.
will.
Yeah. No, that's a fair point. It's different when you're like, I think you would like this. That's a totally fair assessment because, worst case scenario, somebody watches a movie they don't enjoy, but that's totally normal and fine, and it's part of life. I'm going to repeat this louder for reviewers. Watching movies you don't enjoy, reading books you don't enjoy is totally normal and fine and not assault on your person.
Yep.
But yeah, doing it in a negative way, saying don't even bother watching this, I cannot imagine a context in which I would do that unless like the movie is unfinished, there's only half a movie, and I know you're going to hate that you don't know the ending. So I'm going to say, don't watch it until they've finished it. Other than that, I don't know why. Because how can you ever know somebody that well? You're married to somebody for 30 years and one day you just discover that they have several bodies in the basement. You don't know people. You can't know what they're going to like.
Exactly. I don't know myself that well. There's been lots of stuff that I think I'm going to love or I think I'm going to hate, and then I have the opposite reaction. So how would I know for anyone?
You might have
so that's a
bodies
constant.
in the
I definitely, we don't have basements in Arizona, but if I had a basement, I would definitely put bodies in it just to have them. There might be some at my mom's house in Nebraska. I don't know, but maybe I'll inherit some bodies in the basement.
You'll inherit somebody's.
Let's go really dark. Maybe she'll die in the basement. You don't know. So there we go.
Listen, I'm like all the crimes that James is potentially admitting to.
No, I just pinned them all on my mom. Are you even listening?
As he does in every single episode. So
possession is 9/10 of the law, dude.
Ever since Elon killed the algorithms, no one listens to this show, so it's okay.
Oh gosh.
Untrue, and we love our listeners. But I'm going back to Pickman here, and I had a question. Do you think, how do I phrase this? So they make a big deal out of how Thurber, is that his name? The main character? They make a big deal out of how he won the contest the previous year. It doesn't serve any purpose throughout. Like even without that, we would accept that he's running a gallery and we'd accept all this. Do you think that win is what made Pickman target him?
I didn't think of it that way. What it appeared to me to be was sort of setting Will up as somebody who's going to be jealous and like possessive of his leadership and title and superiority. Because there was a little bit of leaning into that towards the end, where the others were like, oh, you only dislike him because you are jealous and you're a sore loser, and some sort of thing like that. So I figured that was why they were setting him up to be this golden child, so that everybody could doubt him when he expressed his concerns, so that it could sound
that.
like somebody who doesn't want to lose his title and doesn't want to lose his status. Because we would have needed something, some reason for people not to trust him. Because normally in the arts, when somebody says, hey, be careful, this guy's dangerous, you kind of tend to believe them a little bit, or at least investigate further. So I figure that's what it's for, so that everybody has a reason to discount him completely when he says, guys, you can't put this in an exhibition.
Well, and I also took that as like he's already making a name in legitimate art, right? So then being tied to this would make him also kind of jumpy. Like, am I risking my name or that kind of stuff? But
Right.
yeah.
I'm not sure if I noticed. Did we ever see his art in the episode?
I remember the sketch as far as with the model, but I don't recall seeing anything else from him, because there's so much of a focus on PICKMAN'S stuff.
That's interesting. Yeah. I don't remember any either. No, just the sketch.
I guess it wasn't necessary. We can just sort of imagine what kind of art it is.
Maybe it would have made it too subjective, and I'd be like, he's a shitty artist. How did he get here?
Yeah, there's a real danger. That's bad, and therefore I don't like it, and therefore it's not art.
I only like coloring pages. This guy sucks.
And not even pages out of a coloring book, just pages.
That's right.
Pages.
That's right.
I want my nudes to have both tits the same size.
It's very unrealistic.
It's actually funny that's the opening scene of the episode. That's kind of like so funny. You're expecting the thing to turn into this like rom-com, historical rom-com,
right?
About the painter and his muse, and how they trick her father into letting them marry or something. It's such a silly little scene to start with.
I do love when he goes to the party that he's late for, and starts seeing like the monsters or whatever you want to call them. I really liked that scene. I thought that was a pretty strong scene.
That scene gives me anxiety. I struggle with that stuff. I don't look away at the horror bits, but like stuff like that, when somebody's in public and about to make an ass of themselves, I have to look between my fingers and look away, because it's so hard to watch. So yeah, good job on that. It worked.
You're gonna love hanging out with me in person. All right.
Damn it, I was gonna say like, oh, we're gonna have a fun time. I'm gonna constantly be looking at our hands like, God damn it.
We're just gonna be under the table.
It's not awkward yet. It's not awkward yet. We have to be weird now.
Oh man.
Uh-oh, I've given you my weakness now. Shit.
No, you're just giving us something to look for. Like, all right, this will be the telltale sign.
How do we make this weirder?
That was definitely a really accomplished scene. I have to admit, it made me look through my fingers. So, being accomplished.
And I mean, I don't know of any moment where, obviously with this episode, since we're talking about this episode, I don't know of any moment in this episode in which I had that same feeling. But I mean, as far as like feeling I'm so uncomfortable I can't even look. But mine was definitely the concept that people don't know what genre they're in. The characters don't know what genre they're in, right? But just the sheer fact that we're talking about, I forgot how many years later that he's got a family and a kid. So like 9 years later, he's got a family and a kid. And PICKMAN made such an impact on you that that you want nothing to do with him. You really don't want anything legitimate to do with him. And I just found it so odd that, you're still putting yourself in these situations.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, where I'm like, you are making me uncomfortable, because not that I go out of my way to not be around people, but if somebody seems like they might be problematic or a little bit spooked by something, like, we're not going to hang out. We're not going to hang out, especially when I looked at your paintings and it freaked
Oh
me
yeah.
out.
There's this bit near the end where Pickman basically goes, you know what, I'm going to set fire to all my paintings and withdraw from the exhibition, and basically like I'm going to blow up everything in my life if only you'll come to my house right this minute in the dead of night. Like, buddy, come on. Talk about not
red
knowing what
flags.
genre, not knowing what genre they're in. Like, there is no chance, absolutely none. But then I thought about it, and like, yeah, that's easy to say because we say this stuff from a certain background and a certain, baggage of experiences and lessons that we learned on our own skins when it comes to listening to our instincts and listening to our bodies when they say somebody is unsafe or that we're not okay around somebody, and just getting the hell away from that situation. That's my first instinct always. And then again, also, we have to admit that not everybody's like that. I know plenty of people who don't have those instincts yet, and I hope they never have cause to develop them, and who will just walk into trouble and continue to trust and to believe the best in somebody well beyond the last red flag has been flown.
Right.
Well beyond.
I wonder if horror writers and authors and an audience are more likely to say no to stuff like this. Like, oh fuck no, that's how horror movies start. Like I just wonder overall, like, people who don't like horror, are they more likely to accept an offer like this? I don't know.
I think it's the opposite. I think people that are not into horror are probably going to be more likely to stay away from this, whereas people that are into horror, there's the intrigue, and I think with Thurber's thing, he points out your paintings infect my mind, and just the sheer fact. Now, obviously, he's not somebody who likes it, but I'm making a comparison with horror fans who are already enthralled, engaged in this type of thing. He's being reflected in them. I'm sorry, they're being reflected in him, where he's now infected with this. He doesn't want anything, again, legitimately to do with this. Doesn't want to sponsor a show with it. Doesn't want to be around these paintings. But there's something that's calling him. He has to know. So I think horror fans would look at it that way, as far as like, yeah, it's creepy, but I want to know what's happening. I want to know what's behind that door.
Yep.
Whereas non-horror fans would be like, no, I don't need to go check behind the door.
Yeah.
You make a valid point, because I would have personally been at Pickman's apartment trying to see the stuff. Like, not invited. I would have been like, hey, buddy, how you doing? You want to grab something to eat? Like,
I brought you some water.
That's true. If he speaks that way, I might not. But
I would have gone nowhere near the fucker, but I respect your enthusiasm.
I just want the art. I don't care about him.
Did you ever have a time in your lives, like when you were teenagers or maybe even later, where you were into horror secretly, like because you were afraid of the sort of societal reaction of being into it openly, or family's reaction or anything like that? Is that something that ever happened to you?
Not me.
I don't know about secret. I think it was, I don't know, because horror itself had this weird stigma. And I'm going to use an old phrase, and if the phrase is no longer okay, then please accept my apologies in advance. But horror was treated like the quote unquote redheaded stepchild, where it's unwelcome, it's unloved, but it's loved by somebody, it's taken care of by somebody. It's where it's at the least, in its very least, it's tolerated, right?
Yeah.
So I think in the 80s and the 90s, you had a lot of good horror, but you had people trying to convince themselves to, and still to this day, this movie wasn't horror.
Yeah.
Like Silence of the Lambs. No, that was like a true crime detective thing.
Yes.
That's a fucking horror movie. So it really became an issue, or has become an issue, of convincing people like, you've already liked horror for all these years. You watch Star Trek. Every episode of Star Trek is horror. Every sci-fi is horror.
Right? I love that.
So for somebody, like, it was never the issue of hiding that I liked it, because there was much more embarrassing stuff that I was into.
Oh, now I need to know.
It was being careful about what you liked around people that were in your circle. So
I get that. At least in Romania, it was like still a huge thing connected somewhat to a sort of satanic panic sort of idea. You were a lot more likely to get labeled as a bunch of other things if you were into metal music and if you were into horror books and movies. But like you said, there were for us it was like acceptable horror. So like Jaws, you can be into Jaws. You can be into Jaws all day long. That's totally fine. Or Alien or whatever. And then there was like the more unacceptable horror like Suspiria, right? Where maybe don't be into that in public. So there was a lot of stuff that we were like sort of careful not to go there in a school setting or in a public setting because it was a little iffy at the time.
Right.
Mine was all about the reaction. Like when I saw how much it upset my mom or how much it upset the priests at the school I went to, man, I couldn't shut up about it.
Gosh, you're such a
told
badass.
Everybody about it, you know, like it was,
love that.
but it was all that reaction. Like I wouldn't say it was a healthy thing, you know, it was that makes you react, you know what I mean? And
you're so hardcore.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
like we got the same reaction and I just never did it again. And you went like, oh yeah, I'll show you.
I was like, that's it? Wait till you see what I'm watching this weekend, you know? Like, so yeah. I've Don's heard this story too many times, but Jason Voorhees, I got into a fight with a priest about Jason Voorhees and told him he was jealous of Jason because Jason is just out there keeping the commandments. He wants people to be good and follow God and not have sex or do drugs or do these things. And then
so basically like, Jason is Jesus.
He's like the angel of death. He's doing God's will and killing you if you fuck it up.
Oh gosh, I said this in Catholic school.
And so I said it to a priest who got mad, and then I told him he was just jealous because Jason gets to kill the teenagers that piss him off.
I mean, let's be honest, you were telling the truth.
Tell me when I'm telling lies.
Speaking of other fired people.
But yeah, so for me, it was all about the reaction in answer to your question from 20 minutes ago.
I guess the reason why I asked the question originally is because I was wondering about how much of Will is his name, right? How much of Will's arc is actually about the fact that maybe on some level he was intrigued by this stuff, maybe he was compelled by it like a lot of us were, and maybe a lot of his reluctance to want to engage with it was just a social pressure sort of thing, you know.
I mean, even the social mores could play in the idea that you're not supposed to like these things. Well, I'm sorry, James, you were saying?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, I think just that context of this is what's expected of me.
Yeah.
And so, oh no, what's wrong with me that I'm interested in this? I won't even say that I liked this, that I can't stop thinking about it. What's wrong with me?
Because the thing is, when I was super intrigued at that scene when they're doing the exhibition of Pickman's art and he's like the one who's mortified. And you would think that would scream the opposite, that like on a basic level, he's not compelled by it. And I think that's wrong, because if I think of myself at, 15, 16, listening to Wasp or listening to all of these like hardcore metal bands, if I had walked into, civilized society, my family, my parents, my aunts, my neighbors, listening to that music that I was a fan of, I would have been mortified. I would have walked out of the room. I would have had exactly that sort of reaction because, oh no, now everybody's observing this thing. Now it's exposed. Now it's being, perceived. It's not that I'm afraid of their reaction. I don't even want to know what it's going to be because there's no good outcome there. So in a weird way, I kind of related to him having that super visceral, oh no, reaction to the exhibition when everybody else was so chill about it.
I like how you mentioned Wasp. So in my headcanon as you're speaking, they were all blasting Animal. And I just like how that's what I chose. Fuck like a beast. Hell yeah. You
Yeah.
know, like,
That's perfect. That's the one. Yeah.
anyway, unimportant. But yeah.
Well, here's some
where we
things
at?
that I didn't want to leave out that I feel I was
Yeah,
about
definitely.
to. All right, so the idea the phrase that God, I almost said Norbert Thurber. I really almost said Willard, but I was like, oh no, it's too on the nose. Um, what Pickman was doing when he's talking about or describing his paintings, saying, oh gosh, the idea of it's about fear, right? So there's a mad the idea that the mad world drives fear and that art is fear and this whole great thing that he says where it's like you paint what you see, and not as like kind of a throwaway line of like, hey, like you typically do it when somebody is serving as a subject. I see this figure in front of me, human, object, animal, whatever, in front of me that I have to paint or draw based off of my perspective. And you see in that initial one that everybody has a different perspective of the model. So one is drawing from the side, one is drawing from the back, one is sketching from the front, one has a direct view of the individual.
Mhm.
And it could have easily been a throwaway line, but what he's referring to is you're not talking about the things that you visually see with your eyes, but those same things that would consume you about this painting, right? Those fears, those things that you see when all the lights are out, the things that you see in your dreams, the things that you experience, like that's what I'm drawing. These are the horrors for me.
Mhm.
And it's great because you have that parallel between paint what you see and write what you know, which was one of the better pieces of advice that I was ever given, which is, write what you know, write what you're comfortable with, write what you understand. And I think the parallel that you can draw between those two different forms of art is within writing, you're making a product based off of what you understand. And I think for Pickman and anybody who's looking at his art, the appeal is you don't understand it, because he's talking about, his fears and people going to see the things that they're concerned about. And you can't understand those fears as rational in some cases because they're irrational to you. So that may make some people may become grotesque to some people, may turn some people off. It may intrigue some people. And we see with Thurber, like it's all of that. Like he's disgusted by it, he's turned on by it, he's enthusiastic about understanding more. But the one thing he doesn't do is he doesn't stop paying attention to that art.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big deal. Doesn't stop paying attention to it.
Yeah, and plus, it's not just what the artist paints, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's also the interpretation of the person who sees it. So I'm going to attach something to this sculpture, painting, sketching, whatever it happens to be. I'm going to attach something to it as far as the way it connects with me. So your painting, your piece of art is what I see about the world and how it gets reflected. And that viewpoint, that perspective is probably going to be different than the creator.
Absolutely. If you're painting a dead body, that's going to be an entirely different feeling for somebody who's looking at it, who is a mortician or a gravedigger in their day job. It's going to be entirely different for a biologist. It's going to be entirely different for, somebody who's never seen one before or who's never even plucked a chicken before. Absolutely. And the dead body stays the same. The painting stays exactly the same. We bring so much to every single thing we experience.
That kind of rolls into why I don't like don't watch this. Like, no, but really, like, going back to what I was saying earlier about that, like, you don't know what people are bringing to it and how that will affect things as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
For a second, I thought you were going to say it rolls into why I don't like the accent. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no. Let's talk about the
Yes, the
accent.
accent.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But I do like the whole taking Thurber down into his, I don't know, studio, whatever the hell it is,
Lair.
to where the art is and where the monster is. And I like that the point is to show him that the monster is real.
Right.
And then as the writer that I am, I love that he just gets killed before we find out what the fuck he was trying to do. It's so, that's the most realistic thing about all of this to me. You have this plan, you're taking him down there, and then you just die and no one knows what the hell you were trying to do. Like,
You
was he
managed
going to invite him to
find some
join him?
nonsense at the end, and that's it. I want to
Yeah,
believe
like-
he just wanted the satisfaction of somebody else knowing.
See, and that was one of my things. But like, was it like, hey, join me and we can do this together? Or was it like, I need somebody to take my place so I can be free? Or was it literally, I just want someone else to see what I see, which is the one I think it is, right?
Okay.
But I love that we don't know. We're never in Pickman's head. So
I
we
didn't
don't
get
get
this
to know
vibe
what
from
he was
him.
doing.
I never got the vibe that he was trying to do anything more heinous, like trying deliberately to murder him or something like that. I never got the vibe that he was trying deliberately to sacrifice him or anything like that.
Mhm.
I don't know
think so
what
either.
it was, but it just didn't feel like that sort of thing. It felt like he just wanted a friend. Oh my God, this is so sad. As
Well,
I
even-
say this, I'm like, oh.
But even look at his relationship with James, the child. Like, he's legitimately engaged with the kid. It's not just I like, we kind of get the vibe of he's screwing with your kid, but that's because the story is coming through Thurber. So
Yeah.
like, that's his fear, that you're messing with my kid. I don't think that he's actually messing with the child in any way. I think he's waiting and he's engaged with someone else who's making art, So if you go into the sad, he just wants a friend, even that scene with the kid gets so much stronger.
Yep.
I hate you both right now.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking,
What do
like,
you got, Don? You just want everybody dead?
No, but I did laugh because I'm looking back at my notes and it says, "Please be the kid in the oven. Please be the kid in the oven. Please be the kid in the oven." And I will talk. I'll just talk about that visual. Like, as a horror consumer, you know what's about to happen, or at least you have an idea of what's about to happen, which is.
But you want it to happen too.
Okay, yes, what I wanted to happen, what I was willing to happen, and it's still a good payoff. I feel as though if I'd done what James normally does with spoilers, I still would have had the same reaction, because even as we started talking about this, the way that somebody describes something may not fit the way in which I've absorbed that description or the way I processed it. So you could, it's like, oh, the son was in, the oven. The mother was cooking because she was spooked by a demon, or she was possessed by a demon, or whatever, right? But the visual of that disembodied head in the pot, in the oven, smoking, and I immediately thought, like, holy shit, that was good. That's a good ending. And I don't mean, the typical, like, everybody lives. I thought it was a good ending because just going back to that idea of your art consumes me, your painting consumes me. You see, that's the effect that whatever this is, this demon, the spirit, this evil being, whatever, is having through the paintings. It's about expanding. It's about taking more souls, or however you want to look at it. Whoever it can affect and sacrifice, or get them to sacrifice themselves. I thought that was really a really cool touch. That, and with the one payoff I didn't get was what I was hoping for. And let me make sure my notes are right here. I was hoping that the wife was actually cutting her fingers. Like, she had already finished the vegetables and she just kept going.
Oh, that would be a classic. That would be a horror classic. Absolutely.
I mean, you combine that with she'd already, gouged her eyes out, or had her eyes gouged out. and you see her, he's like, "Oh, what's honey? What's wrong, honey? Is it my face?" And you just see that arm come up with
Mhm.
no hand, and she wipes something. Oh, it got something on me, something like that. But I was still happy with the payoff here because you get the understanding that this is not going away.
Mhm.
This is not something that is going to go away with, closing a door and setting it
Yeah.
on fire or painting over something to prevent its escape.
Mhm.
It's here and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah,
Um,
it was a good, satisfying ending, definitely.
I love how the ending just keeps building. Like, you could have just done, I destroyed all the paintings. Holy fuck, why are they here?
Mhm.
That's a good twist. That's a
Mhm.
good twist. And then you have the family staring at the painting. That's a
Mhm.
good twist. Oh
Mhm.
shit, it's affecting our family now. Then you go to the kitchen and she's facing away, and everything in you goes, oh fuck, it's
Yep.
coming. Here it is. And she turns and she looks glorious. I love everything about this look. And when you add the fingers that you were just talking about, Don, I want that even more. But I adore this. And then that's still not the end.
Mhm.
Like, all of this horror just keeps building and building and building. And what I love about him walking to the oven is he already knows. He
mhm.
doesn't have to go look.
Yep.
But this sums up everything about his character throughout the story. He knows the horror and he still has to
go.
look.
Yep.
Mm.
Yep.
And holy shit, is that strong. Plus, it brings back the whole feast thing that we didn't really talk about, but like it puts it here. Plus, it was in the paintings. Like, this is a glorious fucking ending. I just adore this. It's not my favorite episode, but I think this is my favorite scene in this show so far.
It is the kind of ending that it makes you wonder, okay, what the hell is going to happen after the credits? Because, like, well, where does he go? Does he go to the police next? Does he, like,
Right?
How can this possibly go anywhere?
Does he have dinner first?
Does he just have a nice sit down and reconsider his life choices? Yeah.
Look, his wife made a nice meal for him, and when I looked at my notes earlier, I was like, what the hell did this mean? But I wrote down, it's nice that the preparation is fresh and not processed.
No microwave meal for his family.
Oh my God. That's
you
great.
see the advantages of having a lovely stay-at-home wife and
you had
a
a free-range child, so
Oh man. Oh my
Probably
goodness.
not grass-fed though.
But man, yeah, I loved this ending. I think it's one of the strongest things in this whole show, and it also pulls back into that vibe I call the creep show vibe, but it's obviously in many things. But everything about this last scene is just glorious to me, and it even makes up for the accent.
Nothing in the entire Garden of Eden can ever make up for that accent. But it is a really good ending. I'll give you that.
This concludes another episode of the Necronomid.com. Join us next time when we look at Cabinet of Curiosities, Episode 6, Dreams in the Witch House.